Okay, why don't we bring in today's political panel now? There's a fair bit happening around us. Joining us, Labor MP Sally Sitou is in Sydney. Welcome back, Sally. And Nationals Senator Bridget McKenzie is in Rockhampton. Welcome to you to Bridget. Beef Week, I think, where you are, but we spoke to one of your colleagues about that yesterday. Let's go to the pressing family budget matter of interest rates, and I'll start with you, Sally. There's a bit of trouble here, isn't there, with the budget looming? The Treasurer obviously inclined to spend some money to soften the cost of living pressures on some Australians, but every dollar of that risks upsetting the Reserve Bank, doesn't it, based on what the Governor's been saying today?
I think it's really clear that since we've been in government, the budgets that we have delivered have had two main focuses. So first is to put downward pressure on inflation, and the second is to provide cost of living relief where we can. And the Treasurer has done an amazing job of putting downward pressure on inflation, and you can see that with the surplus that he delivered, we showed spending restraint to get there, and I'm hoping that we get another surplus in the upcoming budget. And where we can, we have tried to provide cost of living relief. Like you said, families are doing it tough at the moment. And so the tax cuts that are going to be delivered from the 1st of July that are going to all Australian taxpayers, not just those in the top income bracket, but all Australian taxpayers, that is going to make a material difference to those households. So someone on about $100,000 a year, they're going to be $2,200 better off with these tax cuts. And that's the focus of all the budgets that we've delivered, putting downward pressure on inflation and delivering cost of living relief to Australian households.
All right, a response to that, Sally. I imagine it's too late for the Treasurer to rewrite the budget, leave aside the laws of economics, but the budget's probably already fully cooked. Does there need to be spending restraint, particularly in the first year, the one that he's handing down the budget for?
Absolutely happy to talk about the laws of economics here, Greg. And here are the facts. When there were upgrades in our revenue, unexpected upgrades, the Treasurer banked 87% of that. That is spending restraint. If we compare that to what the Morrison government did, they could only bank 40% of revenue upgrades, and John Howard, when he was in power, even less, 30%. So when we were talking about the laws of economics, there we go, 87% of revenue upgrades banked to ensure that we could get a surplus, that we could bring down debt. And the work that the Treasurer has done in bringing down our country's debt has meant that we have saved on interest in debt repayments. So that's significant restraint there. But where we can offer cost of living relief to households who we know are doing it tough, I think we ought to. So my question to Bridget here is, what of those cost of living relief measures we have introduced, for example, the tax cuts that are coming in from the 1st of July, would she change?
Yep. Sally Sitou, let's go to China's military action up near the Korean Peninsula. We've already covered it on the program, so I won't summarise it. But the Prime Minister and Richard Marles have said that they've raised this at all levels with their Chinese counterparts. Should there be any consequences, though? Are there diplomatic levers that haven't been pulled, which should be, by the Australian government?
It is clear that those actions were totally unacceptable, and the Prime Minister and Defence Minister have made that very clear. And these diplomatic representations have been made at the highest level because the safety and well-being of our defence personnel is of utmost priority to us.
Get back to a domestic economic issue. Perhaps we should have pinned it onto the budget, but there's been a Senate committee report on supermarket pricing that's come down today, and there seems to be consensus here, Sally, around a grocery code that would be mandatory. No agreement, though, on forced divestiture, that is the breaking up of supermarket chains, forcing the sale of some outlets. Does the government rule that out for all time and just settle on the mandatory code?
I think, Greg, I would agree with Bridget and the National Parties and the Greens on this point, that The outcome we want to get to here is to have greater competition and a fairer deal for Australian consumers and Australian producers. Where we may disagree is how we get there. The decisions that we are taking are about how we get there efficiently and effectively, and we think that changing the code of conduct, the Food and Grocery Code of Conduct, which essentially acts as the rule book for how these supermarkets have to deal with producers, that we ought to make that mandatory, not voluntary, like it currently is. And that means that there will be big penalties imposed on them. Craig Emerson is recommending north of $10 million. And those are the changes that are going to make a material difference now on trying to inject competition into what is effectively a duopoly supermarket system that we have in this country. Yeah. The outcome is we want a fairer deal for Australian consumers and producers.
So go on, Sally, I think you want to get a last word in there.
Sorry, Greg, if I could just jump in here. It's a bit difficult to take Bridget credibly on this point, and I appreciate that she really wants to back in farmers, and I absolutely agree with her. But she was in government for 9 years. So the duopoly of Coles and Woolworths did not spring up in the last 2 years. They have been around for many, many years. So I'm not sure what she was doing in the 9 years when she was in government, and she had the ability to really make a difference for those farmers. Where was she? What was she doing?